Hello and welcome to this month's edition of Making Change. I am Hildy Gottlieb, the Chief Mission Officer at Creating the Future. And at Creating the Future, our work is all about moving beyond reacting to what's wrong so that we can reach for what is possible. And I am just so excited to have my guests today, because if there are two people who are all about what is possible, it is Lisa Humanek and Rebecca Hurd. So welcome, guys.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
It is great to see both of your faces on the screen. I want to encourage anybody who is watching to please tweet if you've got questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, share your own stories, your own experience. That Twitter handle is, Twitter hashtag is CTFuture. So it's the hashtag CTFuture. So as we start all of these, if you guys could introduce yourselves, and I was going to say we'll do this in alphabetical order, but you guys are HU and HU. So isn't that interesting? We'll do Lisa, then Rebecca, L, then R. Lisa, if you could just talk a little bit about the journey that has led you to the work that you're doing right now, and how that all fits in with this whole topic of volunteerism as engagement. So go.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely been a meandering path, both literally and figuratively. We've lived in about 5 states during my career, so definitely have done things in a variety of different places and communities. I read recently, I believe it was in Sheryl Sanders' book, that oftentimes when there's a couple and one is on the career ladder, the other one ends up on the career jungle gym. So I got the jungle gym. Which has really led to some amazing experiences and some opportunities to do some neat things. So almost all of my work has been in the community benefit sector. I have done an awful lot in the healthcare industry around volunteerism and community engagement, both in hospital systems and in hospice programs. And I have worked in mentoring and community gardening as an executive director, as well as most recently executive director of Volunteer Southern Arizona, where we were helping about 250 or more community benefit organizations increase their volunteerism and community engagement and make it more impactful. So I'm now based in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm doing consulting in the sector, again, mainly around volunteerism and community engagement. Some strategic and community impact planning, but most of what I'm doing has to do with working with organizations to get more people interested and involved in the work of their mission.
Very exciting. Very exciting, and you really have been all over the place, and it's wonderful to watch how that all weaves together.
Mm-hmm.
So Rebecca Hurd, tell us a little bit about your winding path.
Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca, and I'm beamed in from McCall, Idaho, a very small mountain town, and I didn't grow up out here, but 9 years ago my quest for being in outdoor spaces was that one-way ticket that took me from a very urban environment of Philadelphia to McCall, and I'd say that I have found paradise. And I think that's a condition of how can we be at our best, or what are those spaces that we live in that bring out our best, and to me it is living in such a beautiful place as McCall. And I'm truly committed to creating and holding spaces for individuals, organizations, and communities to be at their best, because ever since I can remember, I've been all about community. And my mom said, you've always wanted to help people. It's just part of who you are. And others have said, you are community. That's what it is. So when people ask, what is my agenda? It's creating the future with community. And through that, I created my own practice about 5 years ago. And I work with individuals, organizations, and communities. And really, it's sectorless and it's labelless, because I think we all want the same thing. I've worked in global corporations. I've also worked in very tiny community benefit organizations. I've also run a small business with my husband. But in every single one of those places, what are we aiming for, and what will good look like? And if we change those questions, we really can have extraordinary results. So what I do is exactly what I want to be doing, and it's dancing in my sweet spot with others.
Oh, man, just makes my heart dance with you. So as I ask so often on this program, you guys have been witness to change, both large, small, both personal, both company, both organizational, community. When you guys see change happening, what do you see going on that's creating that change? And whoever of you want to start, just dive on in.
To me, when you see community change, you feel community change. It's you might be witnessing things, but you're feeling relationships. You're feeling people alive. There's really no secret sauce to what community engagement and community change is all about. It's really honoring something that's so often said, but far too often overlooked. And that's really, are we taking the time to get to know each other better as people? We are not what we do. If we are so very fortunate to, perhaps you get your W-2 or 1099 at some place that you're passionate about, that's great. But that's only one small slice of yourself. And when we create those conversations that we get to learn more about each other, we uncover that much more beyond maybe what a job title has. So when those conversations are becoming the norm, we get to know each other. What happens when we get to know each other? We develop trust. And when we develop trust, we are then willing to actually start talking about what can we achieve together. All too often people are told you need to go meet with that person and solve something, or in community benefit work, hey, there's a grant on the line, so let's throw these people together and slap something together. And it goes right to the what and the how and the mechanics of something without actually honoring each other. So when community change happens, the beauty of it is it's that simple. It's relationships.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with Rebecca. It's people coming together to work together to achieve a shared vision that they have for their community. And certainly there are leaders in that effort, but more than anything, it's everyone feeling like they're in it together. And the trust that Rebecca mentioned is vital. People need to know that the people working alongside them are in it with them and being the same thing and doing the same thing and wanting the same outcomes. And so there's really power in that coming together around that shared hope and dream for what a community can be.
You guys have any examples of that? Any stories that you've seen recently?
Oh, gosh. I think
it's hard to choose one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard to choose one. One that I found just really beautiful and moving was during the time that I was in Tucson. And it had to do specifically around the concept of literacy and a community realizing that that was a condition that was weak in their community, and in order for them to achieve the vision of what they wanted their community to be, it was going to take a higher degree of literacy. And not just reading literacy, but math literacy and health literacy and just knowing how to navigate the community together. And they came out to the larger community and said, these are the things we think we need to make our neighborhood better and our neighborhood stronger and our schools and our social institutions and our businesses and everything. This is what we need. And brought together the organizations that could provide services and programs that they thought would help get them there in partnership. You know, not just kind of dive in, do a program and leave, but really help build the capacity of the neighborhood itself to drive the change that they wanted to see and the change that they wanted to be. And it was really led by a group of immigrant women who did not know English very well, and they started, it was a group maybe of 7 to 9 of them, that started by getting together as a group and learning English and then guiding the rest of the neighborhood and moving this forward. It was beautiful.
Wow, you know, I mean, and it goes directly counter to the we need strong leaders from the top down, and that's where change happens. And the first cry we always hear is we need to get the banks involved and the business community involved, and that's not at all what you're talking about.
Yeah, and there were certainly, you know, some community benefit organizations that came together and had this thought, you know, of could we do this? But they recognized very quickly, you know, we can't pick and choose where we're going to do it. That where we do it has to choose us. And so they did put information out saying they were willing to work with a neighborhood in this way. And there were about, you know, there were 3 that came forward and 1 that really just embraced it like crazy and did it themselves.
I love that concept of it has to choose us. Rebecca, what have you seen? Because I know that you're doing a lot of that kind of stuff.
There's one community, not that I live in, but another rural community where we have moved from what we often see as something very programmatic going into a school system because people really care about the youth, but it was involving maybe a handful of partners with the school district. And now, in the last year, has evolved from 3 programmatic things to a true community hub because we've changed the questions and invited the entire community to say, will you be part of this journey together? What is it we were aiming for if everyone has everything they need? Because the youth can't be successful unless the parent, the caregiver, the neighbor, every single person in the community has to be able to reach their highest potential in order for the youth to succeed. So over the past year, we've been holding these hub sessions, and that's bringing together community members. And I guess you could say they also are parts of organizations that are the federal agencies, local agencies, government agencies, educators, community benefit organizations, beautiful community members I also just call free agents because they are just beautifully navigating the community and wanting to share back to the community. And together, by shaping the conversation around who else cares about this, what do we have together, we are connecting, and we are meeting every 2 weeks, and in the time between the 2 weeks, community change is happening. So when people say, oh, that relation stuff, oh, that taking the time for that, it's if you do not do the being up front and continue to infuse the being throughout all of the doing, you will not make significant community change. So with this group that continues to grow, there are several hundred people, and I don't measure outputs in the way of head count. These are several hundred people who are engaged. And every single session, we welcome new people warmly, not in the sense of where have you been, but welcome. And this is what this group is all about. These are the types of questions we have. And we don't talk about money there, and they joke with me because if someone brings up money, they look at me, Rebecca, I know we're not supposed to talk about money, but the whole intention is if you talk about money, it's scarcity and competition. But when the money is coming forward to talk right now, it's smart money. It's saying what is possible when we do have that community hub. If our organization could co-locate in there and we could pay a monthly amount toward keeping the lights on in the place. And I say that's a smart talk about money. We can talk like that. But, and when new people come and maybe they say our organization is running out of funding for this program, we just focus on what is the program making possible, what conditions would need to be in place to keep it going, and perhaps the grant is no longer a part of the equation. What you're looking for are more engaged community members to spend time with these girls after school in an extraordinary leadership program. We have people who want to do that. So your program can indeed live as something that the community is part of, far beyond any kind of grant structure or cycle that money's gone, that program was great, but we no longer have it.
I love the concept that Rebecca just talked about as the free agents in the community who see something happening and believe in it so strongly that they want to be a part of it even though they don't have a formal relationship with any of the organizations involved. And to me that really speaks to the power of that community coming together around that shared vision, is that they're able to draw people in who normally wouldn't be part of those circles.
You know, I am just so fascinated by the change of the questions, which you guys know is always where my brain goes. But it's so very different than what we frequently see when we're focused on, you know, Rebecca, you mentioned programmatically. When we're focused on, we're an organization and we need to get volunteers so that, Lisa, you've done a beautiful video that talks about we need to stop using and utilizing people and start engaging and deeply getting to know people. You're asking questions about who else cares about this and what do we have together, which is really different from what so much of what organizational leaders, program leaders who care about the community are encouraged to do in terms of going out and finding people they can use and utilize. How do you see that difference? I know, Lisa, you've been in the volunteer world forever. How do you see that difference between we need free labor versus no, let's stop talking about the free and stop talking about the money and stop talking about the labor and start talking about what we all care about, that you know, Rebecca, you talked about being. It's about being human. How do you see that reconciling, Lisa?
Or have we seen that shift happen?
Yeah, and because I mean that's a huge mind shift for people who came up in that traditional world of we need to get volunteers.
Yeah, or we need volunteers, and again it goes back to that scarcity model, and doesn't take into consideration what we can be together and how the mission can inspire people and the potential for change and sustainable growth in a community can really bring people together. So it's changing the question to, instead of saying we need volunteers to do X, Y, and Z, it's what would the engagement of greater numbers of people in the community make possible, not only for us but for the community as a whole. and then to look at all aspects of the organization and things that probably hadn't been considered before as opportunities to bring people from the community in to share their skills and their talents, and looking at it much more broadly into every single nook and cranny of the organization and the places that it reaches in the community, and think if we had talent and passion from the community involved in this, how much further could we move this forward? And so it really does start by looking at the possibilities. And what does it make possible for the organization, for the volunteers, for the community, for advocates, for board members, the whole range of levels of involvement, and really sort of dissecting that and looking at each one separately, and then the power of bringing it all together. And there have been just some really neat ways to facilitate that, and you just see the energy in the room change, and the looks on people's faces, and the excitement level just builds. And then when the actual community engagement happens, it's got so much more trust and relationship building just organically a part of it.
What are some of the answers that people come up with? So when you ask a room, what does it make possible beyond our organization, or even just for our organization, by engaging, if the community were more deeply engaged in what we care about? What are some of the answers that you hear people come up with?
I definitely hear that they could move forward more quickly than they ever thought possible in affecting the change they want to see in the community. When they start to think about the power of all of the attention on their issue, the passion around their issue, just spreading the awareness and the drive to actually move that change forward. So it's amazing when they look at the assets that they have within the organization already and within their sort of close circle of stakeholders. And if we then start to identify the assets that exist, even just one or two sort of concentric circles beyond that, the excitement level, again, as I said, and the positivity around what they can do then to move forward their mission even faster and in a more impactful way is what builds.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, if organizations are thinking about community engagement and what makes possible, are they walking that talk internally? Have they taken the time to be together internally and get to know each other and see we are side by side, I value you equally as me, and we have these conversations internally, because how can you go forward into your community if you are not doing and honoring that within? So it first has to start within the organization. That doesn't mean in parallel you can't start changing your conversations in your community, but are you modeling that very same sense of engagement? Or are you asking your colleagues, I need this from you? Is everything transactional in your organization, or is it truly built on the relationships you have? And so often when we hit pause in working with community benefit organizations and say, let's start talking about what are we aiming for? What will awesome look like in this community? And also asking what gifts you have to share. People who have been on the same staff for a decade, you will hear them. I didn't know that about you. Oh my gosh, I should connect you to so-and-so. And those very same kinds of connects that go on within the organization then play out every single time you have that same kind of conversation outside with your community. And I think when you look at volunteering in the sense of, here's our list, this is what we need. You are missing so much in a community, and from a very personal experience, when I contacted Community Benefit Organization, and I was very passionate about their cause, and I shared some of the things I'd like to share. I love to tell stories. Are there ways to connect with community members? Perhaps I could write stories with you. And I was told, we don't have that need, but here's our list. Not realizing you would solve for your list if you actually were willing to have a conversation with me, because I love to tell stories that would indeed then engage more people. So that was the end of that conversation, but another community benefit organization had that conversation with me. 5 years later, I am deeply embedded with that organization in so many ways because they've honored getting to know me better as a person in the community. And I give of myself freely. Sure, I give dollars, but I give my skills, I give my experience, and all of that is valued, probably even much more than my dollar donations to them.
Yeah, so I think Rebecca makes a really good point in that that sort of magic that can happen around really authentic engagement isn't always easy, and not every organization is open to it. And I've certainly worked with some organizations where it was an absolute struggle, where, as Rebecca said, we have a need for volunteers. Our volunteer coordinator will handle that. If it doesn't fit that list, then, well, thank you so much for contacting us, but you may be a better fit someplace else. And it's just sad. I mean, because they're just missing out on an amazing opportunity to get people in the community more excited about what they're doing, advocating for their cause, and building that beautiful community together.
Where does that struggle come from? I know in part maybe it's, yeah, and let me just share one of the things that's just popping for me as you guys are talking. I've been thinking a lot this week about the diaper bank that Dimitri and I founded here in Tucson 20 years ago. And I've been writing a lot about it. I've been blogging once a day, just sharing stories from it, from those old days, because it feels good to reminisce, and it feels wonderful to look through old pictures and all of that. And what I was going to be blogging about just today, and I'm sort of smiling about that, is that every time we needed volunteers, we decided to instead have a party. And that, you know, we had the year that we collected as a small consulting firm, not as a diaper bank yet, but as a small consulting firm who wanted to do something for the community. We had 300,000 diapers in our 800 square foot office, which is a second floor walk-up. And that was our first party, is we said, we need to get these 300,000 diapers out of here, and have no idea how. We don't even have an elevator. And had what became known as the hurling party. Is Tucson Electric would pull their big flatbed trucks up under our balcony, and we would bucket brigade the diapers out to the balcony, and we would hurl them off. And people loved it. They loved it because it didn't have, it wasn't need-based, it wasn't scarcity-based. It was come play. We're just going to come play, and look how goofy this is. I mean, I know these issues are serious, but we've got an office full of diapers, and how dumb is that? And it changed everything when it was about our enjoying ourselves together, rather than we have this horrible thing. Maybe we've got a church group that can bring the diapers up, or maybe the Boy Scouts can bring the diapers up and down the stairs. And it's like, you don't rack your brain when life becomes about each other. So I'm wondering what it takes to create that shift from this is hard, we can never find enough people, that scarcity place. What does it take to create the shift from that to, wow, this could be joyful and engaging and fun? What does it take to create that shift?
I think on the
if you don't have diapers to throw off a balcony, I mean.
At the one level, like having a different conversation where you start from a place not of the scarcity, but let's assume most people in the world want to live in a healthy, thriving community. That's our assumption we're going to play with. So let's actually start with that for the conversation with whichever community member you want to meet with. So instead, if you're someone who's in development, instead of going out to meet with the donor and put that megaphone up and tell them everything about your programs and services because you want to show them you're being good stewards of their dollars. Again, it's a transaction. Here's how I'm spending your dollars. And then I'll put the megaphone down, and hopefully I've delighted you. I haven't actually spent any time talking about what excites us about this community that we're both a part of. And if we can start from that place and start from a place of joy and all of the strengths we have in this community, we'll absolutely have the time to get to the things that are going on within our organization, which, oh, by the way, exists for the benefit of the community, not for the organization. So when we're able to maybe just dip our toe into having that conversation, have it with your colleague at work, have it with your family member at the table. What excites us about this community? And what is our organization helping to make possible? And how can we create more of that? And just see how you feel when you change the question.
I think, too, to some extent, the way that sort of the profession of volunteer program administration has evolved has really created a pretty tight box that it exists within. And the best practices have shaped that field. And so if someone is new to being a volunteer program coordinator or a volunteer resource or community engagement person, chances are they're going to get some training specific to that role. And it is very much based on samples, templates, best practices, and instead of freeing people up to think of what the possibilities might be, it's you follow these steps to put your volunteer program in place. And while there's certainly, conditions that organizations can put in place to make their community engagement efforts more successful, and some of them, they are driven by risk management. There are some systems that do need to be in place. I think to an extent those systems have really restricted the creativity and the possibilities that can happen. So I think we're seeing a shift in that, but for an awful lot of organizations, they're just not quite there yet. There's been a standard way of doing things for so long, and they need to have the permission to think a little more openly.
Yeah, permission to think more openly changes everything. It does. It does. I'd love to see you guys come up with a new system. We'll just have a different set of checklists. There's
They're keeping me awake at night. I want a new system.
Well, even thinking of what Lisa was sharing before, and even when there's sites there that curate all the organizations in a community's needs list, and then you can go shopping and see if there's a match to any of these needs lists of all these separate organizations. I know we could build a system, and maybe there's one that exists in the world, where you could come forward into your community and say, this is what I want to share. Now, this could be my knowledge, this could be my skills, but this could also be my stuff that's just laying around in my garage. This could be all these books I have. This could be my time. And then you could be plugged in across the community. If you love to read, you could go read in the preschool class in the morning, go to the senior center in the afternoon to read the current events, and the list just goes on. And if that person's fully engaged in the community and you ripple that out across the entire community, that's where community change happens. And that's where we feel so rich and so engaged. And if you feel you're a part of something far larger than yourself, if you feel that strong sense of belonging, that will just ripple, and it's infectious and it's joyful, and that is the energy that fuels the community to have more of where this becomes the norm. It continues to grow one conversation at a time.
Yeah.
And there's certainly some platforms that are starting to work that way. Instead of, as Rebecca said, getting online and looking at what the needs are and trying to find one that interests you. There are two in particular that I know of where you go on there and talk about, first, what your passions are, secondly, what your skills are, and third, kind of how you'd like to give your time. And it gives you possibilities then. It doesn't do the matching for you, but it gives you some possibilities to think about and explore and reach out and find out more. But they're happening, I haven't seen them yet at a community level. These are kind of national and international opportunities that are happening, mainly for NGOs in other countries. But it would be wonderful to see it come down to the community level.
Well, and it's interesting because Daniel Basel is tweeting, so hello, Daniel, talking about inviting Chicago tutor mentor organizations to connect on a regular basis. So looking Chicago-wide, and I know that Daniel's been doing mapping of different kinds of, again, it's that looking at a community as a network. And weaving those networks together. There's also a real interesting project, and I'm pretty sure that Josh Schachter is watching, and if you are, Josh, tweet on and tell us that you're here. But there's an interesting thing going on in Tucson called Community Shares that Josh has started, which is all about connecting people's passions and the things that they love to do with schools. And it could be, again, I love to garden, I love to read, as Rebecca was saying, I love to whatever, so that teachers in schools can say, yeah, I'd like to talk to that person about bringing that into the school. So I'm hoping that there'll be more platforms that do that on a local basis, because you're right, Lisa, looking at that on a national basis becomes how organizations can use that, but it's not about community. It becomes a platform for how do you get what you need, again. Rather than how do we build community into the work that we do. I think that's really what you guys are talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that it's not owned in any one place. that
And sometimes
really,
that's scary.
it can be, right, but I think there's this growing recognition that if we're going to improve communities, it takes everyone together. It takes, private, public, and community benefit sectors identifying their shared dreams for the community and then bringing together the assets of each of those to move the community forward. And also, I think then secondly comes the recognition that it does take some investment in order to build engagement, whether it's investment of time and energy or some financial resources. There does have to be some sort of system in place that allows people to get connected to each other and creates the opportunities for that. So, again, it's not free labor. We need to get away from thinking volunteerism is free because certainly there's an investment that needs to take place. And mainly it's in the relationships. It's being able to invest who you are and who you want to be with others, but it does take that energy.
Yeah, and Christina Lizasso is tweeting, most volunteer centers don't have time or resource support from the organization to truly engage with volunteers outside the structure, even if they want to. So I know that you guys are seeing, I mean, you guys don't only work with first of all, you're not only working with organizations, I know that both of you are working with communities, but you're not working with huge organizations with huge budgets. And Rebecca, especially, you're working in small rural communities. What would you say to Christina when she says, it takes time, as Lisa was saying, it takes time, it takes support. What shifts are you seeing in how people are allocating that time and support? Because I think that's a part of it, is how do we allocate that time?
The time spent with this one hub program I was talking about is 2 hours every other week, and we run out of time every time because it's that productive of time together. Partnerships are being uncovered that help you get out of the silo of I don't have enough time in my own program and in my own system to see, oh, I could partner with this other person in a totally different way that wasn't even on my radar, because I was just looking down the whole time at my program and my time and my to-do list. So acknowledging there are plenty of things to do, but when we start to put the why we're doing it overlay on top of the to-do list and open up to say, again, who cares about this, is there are community members and resources who exist that can become part of your extended network of we all want the same thing, so let's all start partnering around, and not just partnering, it just becomes the way of the community all the time. So it's not specific to a project, but it's then that person is connecting you to someone else, and there is really no end to all of that. So can you go have one conversation that you start in a different way tomorrow and see what happens? Can we start with those small steps? What does that uncover? And when you ask the person who else cares about this, okay, well then I'll go have that conversation and start that conversation with a different question as well. Not from a place of I need this thing.
Right, right. Christina added that volunteer professionals have to push to define the role of community engagement organization-wide. And I think what you're saying, Rebecca, is it doesn't have to be a push when you're just changing a question that you ask and changing where that's coming from.
And I think within organizations, layered in is so much of structures that came from the corporate world. So oftentimes it's things like marketing or things like outreach, which again is pushing out. And are we simply going to put more posters up and more posts on Facebook? Like, what is any of that making possible? It's like when the radio station isn't coming in well, do you change the channel or do you turn it louder? So there's a choice there, and often it's thinking about the engagement is far different than outreach. Outreach is, if you think about standing behind a table at a community event, it's almost like you're trying to draw people over to your table because I want to then push you some information. So you could still have a table at the community fair, but how about you change the conversations that you're going to have every single time you're at the community fair to actually talk to the person about what excites them. Don't make it all about your organization.
You know, the thought that's occurring to me, and you talking so much, Lisa, about the need for changing the systems, because people really do go where the systems lead them. One of the interesting things that we've been seeing is that traditional leader organizations in communities are all struggling to redefine who they are, and that's everything in the community benefit world, from volunteer centers, community foundations, United Ways, to in the for-profit world, looking at chambers of commerce and economic development people, they're all at that place of trying to redefine because old models aren't working and they're the only thing they have to hang on to. And it's occurring to me as you guys are talking that there is really a role for those organizations to act as conveners and network weavers, and to take on that role of being about building community rather than we advocate for X and we advocate for no, seeing that broader picture. I'm wondering if you're seeing that in United Way's, community foundations, volunteer centers, chambers of commerce, any place that had a traditional role that's now sort of transforming to say, no, we're about bringing people in.
Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
Oh, no, you can go, Lisa.
Like you, Hildy, I'm just seeing the conversations starting and some realization around the fact that they want to do things differently and break out of the systems that have been working for so long but may not be working as well anymore. And so I think, as you said, an awful lot of them are struggling with it, and how do we go about crafting this change and making things more open and changing the questions. And I know when I was with Volunteer Southern Arizona, we were at that struggle too, and had really just started having those conversations as well, and started working with sort of our close-in network of volunteer resource professionals, and starting to help them change the questions that they went back and asked in their own organizations, to try to get even just one more advocate thinking differently about how the community might be engaged in their work. Because oftentimes they didn't have support from the top to make changes, and in the hierarchy of the organization, they generally aren't at a leadership team level, unfortunately. It's interesting that oftentimes the contribution of the community through volunteerism, if you are to monetize it in some way, and there are several systems you can use to do that, is usually equal to or more than the philanthropic dollars coming in. And you usually have someone on your leadership team working on philanthropy, but no one on your leadership team working on engagement. And so I'm starting to see a shift in that, but I do think that we're still struggling with it. And there'll be more shift to happen.
What are you seeing, Rebecca?
I'm seeing that people are hungry for this. People are hungry to be a part of something larger than themselves, whether they're part of a corporate, whatever they're part of, a global corporation, retired citizen, mom, whomever. We all want to be part of something larger. So organizations I'm partnering with who see the value of, there's something to be said for the person who can create and hold that space and help change the questions for others to step into that space. And that's meeting people all over the place of seeing what could be possible. But you meet them exactly where they are, and you honor and value each person equally. So I'm part of helping some organizations make kind of that transformation, wondering, how do we bring everyone on the journey with us? Well, we bring everyone on the journey with us by engaging them in the journey. So how are they part of shaping what the future can look like and what the role of this organization can be to create and hold those spaces that bring organizations and individuals together, whether it's talking about financial literacy or whatever that topic is that we all care about financial literacy. It's one of the conditions to having a healthy community. So when we tuck it under the thing that we all want together, organizations are willing to step in, and knowing a whole host of assumptions come from when you step into that space, but acknowledging that out loud, that assumptions are not facts. They're the stories and the records in our heads. And we all carry a whole host of those around, but are we willing to say that maybe that's not true? And if someone invites you to a meeting, are you willing to table your assumptions and say, that might not be true. Everything my predecessor told me about that organization may indeed not be fact, and it is limiting us to move this community forward.
And I think what's beautiful about what Rebecca said too is that we've sort of been focusing the last couple of minutes on the community benefit sector, but I'm seeing the same thing happen in government and in the private business sector, where they're looking more broadly at the community and their role in it and starting to change the questions as well. And so, for example, a Chamber of Commerce is able to change the questions not only internally, but for every business that's a part of it, for them to start looking differently at how they are part of the community and what kind of assets and skills and relationships they can build because of the resources they have. So, and the conversations are happening more across sectors than I've ever seen them before.
And it's interesting because the way we've always seen it is traditionally very, very siloed, where a company will give back to the community and provide volunteers to an organization, rather than saying we're all part of this together. It's a very different mindset, what you guys are talking about. A question for some of the folks who are tweeting, who are in organizations, who would love to do more in terms of engagement versus the traditional transactional, scarcity-driven, looking for volunteers kind of thing. What are some day-to-day things that somebody who doesn't have the power to make decisions, which everybody sort of feels, you know, I'm just a manager, I'm just a mid-level person, I'm just for those people who are feeling they're just what are some things that they can do on a day-to-day basis to maybe change things within the organization's for-profit, non-profit, government where they're working, to change a conversation to focus more on engagement rather than that transactional thing? What are some concrete steps people can take?
Within an organization, if you're hosting a staff meeting, whatever type of organization you have, you are in control of the agenda. It does not have to look like how it has always looked. And if you just go around the table and have everyone telling you what you're doing at a staff meeting, what is that making possible? So there's something you can completely control, is how do you have staff meetings? Are we starting to engage each other in different ways? And this is not saying, oh, let's do this little icebreaker game. This is very intentional and very authentic. If we say we value one another, we believe every single person has so much to share and we want to bring out the best in each other. If those are our values, then what's the action we can take? Well, we can actually start to get to know each other better. And we can actually start to talk about what we're all aiming for together. So, and other things I tell organizations, if you're having some kind of community meeting, anything involving a name tag, this is going to also save you time. Don't make name tags with people's names and organizations on them. Let them come to the table and fill out their name tag and tell them, put on your first name, and then below it, share something that excites you about the community. It does not need to say, you aren't what you do, and you're also marginalizing the people who don't have something to put below their name. So those are two very tactical, practical things that can just create a sense of you're valued and we're side by side in this community together.
I think too, for that, potential volunteer resource professional who's feeling very siloed and very trapped by a system, they can start small. They can reach out and start to build the relationships with those that are volunteering in their organization. And as Rebecca said, get to know them beyond what it is they're doing for the organization and learn more about what drives them, what are they passionate about, what are their dreams, and start to look at ways to get them connected differently to the organization. And maybe find one other champion in the organization that they work with, another staff member who can also see that potential, and start just to build small. Get one or two new and creative ways of engaging the community, see the success in that, and let others in the organization witness it and see the power of it. And build slow and small, and eventually it'll be a movement that just takes off.
It's so interesting. You guys are really talking about, I love the fact that when we're talking in the big picture, we're talking about it's engaging the community, it's engaging outside, but when I asked what steps people can take, you both went internally to the fact that we don't engage internally. And that's just really fascinating to me, that engagement starts inside. Engagement starts within and with each other. That's something that one would not normally go to. We'd normally go to well, how do we do that? How do I engage more people out there? You're talking about starting practicing what we preach, I guess.
And even externally, if someone's sitting out there and is interested in engaging their talents and their time in something about which they're really passionate. Rebecca shared the example earlier of going to one organization where the thinking just wasn't there in terms of how they could engage her creatively and the talents that she had to give were not recognized as something that would move the organization forward. For those people, don't settle. Keep going like Rebecca did until you find that organization where you're really going to be able to build that relationship and have those passions and those dreams together and follow that journey through to where it can be a beautiful thing. And don't, like I said, don't get trapped in a system that's not going to make you feel that.
Yeah. Josh is asking via Twitter, what role can the philanthropic community play in supporting cultural shifts inside organizations that foster new volunteer models? So the philanthropic, I'm assuming, Josh, that you mean foundations and folks who donate to organizations. What role can donors and philanthropists and foundations play in supporting those cultural shifts to foster new ways of engaging inside? Any ideas that you guys have? Have you seen any interesting things happening there?
I think when foundations or donors, which AKA are also community members, are looked at as community members. So they're coming along to the table not with people looking at them with dollar signs in their eyes, but this is a community member who has so much to share. And yes, maybe the asset will be that foundation or donor can give some dollars toward building that new system, but the system to be built is at the end of the equation. It's after when they are part of the conversation of what will success look like, what will community engagement make possible, and then when we get to the actions, then there might be a space there. And yes, it's going to take some money to build this thing that absolutely makes sense to support what we've all agreed that we want.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The foundations, as being the part of the community, they can oftentimes bring those philanthropic dollars. Being very open about the fact that this is just one condition for success of our overall dream, and starting the conversations with the organizations to which they're providing that funding about, what are the other conditions, and if we talk about engagement of the community, how can we help facilitate that too? And again, just create another condition that's going to drive us forward to that ultimate possibility that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think what we're sensing is that that very, very tight line between the fact that our traditional systems are so deeply rooted in scarcity. They're so deeply rooted in going it alone. And what you guys are really talking about is that whole theory of collective enoughness, which we talk about so much at Creating the Future, that together we have everything we need, and that it's only on our own that we experience scarcity. When you're in the middle of scarcity, it's hard to think like that. Your brain goes, oh, I got to protect myself. And what you guys are really talking about is establishing those relationships of trust so that you have something to fall into when you do go to that scarcity place. Because we're all human, and we do go to the scarcity place sometimes. So it's a very different, which do you do first? Do we create family and community first so that when things go, we have someplace to go? But that goes very, very counter to where we tend to go when we're feeling scarcity.
I think when you have this awareness, even that scarcity is at play, that alone is tremendous power for what you're going to do with your thinking. So once we're aware, why am I feeling this way? And able to see it, because it's very clear when you see it. I am feeling scarcity. Scarcity of time, dollars, whatever it is. And if you can hit pause in that moment, and it may sound very simple, and it really is, to say, hit pause and say, who else cares about this? And to be able to look up. So in that moment, acknowledge the power of assumptions and the fact that they are indeed assumptions.
Yeah, and being able to get rid of those assumptions, recognize them, realize the role that they've been playing in developing the systems under which you've been working, and start to look at the community as an entire system and look at the possible ways that people can be engaged throughout that entire system and not possibly in the narrow silos that they have been before.
We really do have systems that are entirely rooted on the assumption of scarcity. You guys are just bringing that so clearly to the fore, and I love the thought that when we realize we're in scarcity, which is how are we gonna? We don't have enough. We can't until I love Rebecca asking that question. Okay, who else cares about this? It gets to one of the questions that the Food Conspiracy Co-op is tweeting. What does it take for a food co-op to engage its owners and community at large in beyond buying groceries? So a food co-op that is all about nutrition, all about building things together. They're not just talking about the community, but what does it take to engage the owners of the co-op, which are everybody? Have you guys seen anything in terms of co-ops that are engaging the people in the actual mission and reason that they're there, rather than we're about getting a discount on food?
Well, you can probably speak to it in greater detail, but what's going on in northern Nevada with their food co-op side by side with their food bank brings community together around every community member deserves access to healthy, nutritious food, and it's all co-located in one space, and we're all side by side as equals, having those conversations, having the community garden, looking at what canning can make possible, cottage food law relaxation. So the fact that you have a co-op, the beautiful thing is you have a bricks and mortar space that already exists to convene and engage the community in these conversations.
Mm. Oh, wow.
It reminds me somewhat of the concept of neighboring, which really focuses on how people come together around the services they've been receiving, but to then become a part of that and have their assets recognized as well. And as a community, they come together and look at all the ways that that can build on other parts of their vision for the community. And so I think that's almost a more powerful concept than volunteering. I love the neighboring concept.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I am trying to keep up with the Twitter stream here. The whole notion of scarcity has absolutely triggered people. Christina is saying the scarcity mindset can hamper collaboration and community engagement, awareness of it, label it, work on culture. Daniel's talking about scarcity as a good way to describe the challenges of networking and working with others. Again, talking about that scarcity mindset just hampers our being with other people. Volunteer Connections is talking about fear coming from the feeling that you can't do it alone, which is true, and loves hit pause and ask who else cares about this. It removes the reason for the fear. So clearly what you guys are talking about is resonating with folks. We have got about 5 more minutes, which I cannot believe how fast this is going. Are there any stories that you guys would like to share that you've seen of people who have moved into that space, who maybe have come from something that was very, very traditional, but are now thinking about things differently and what they may be seeing, or any other stories that you would like to share before we wrap up?
I think what Rebecca has been living up in Idaho is probably the most powerful example I've been aware of in the last few months, so I'd love to hear her talk about that a little bit.
I would as well. Oh, no. And that was the end of that? Oh my goodness. We'll never call on anybody ever again. Welcome to the internet.
Hopefully she'll make it back.
I hope she can dial back in, but is there anything, Lisa, that has been standing out for you, both in this conversation and in the work that you're doing? Because one of the things that I've found fascinating is you are in a brand new community. You have barely been there. Have you been there a year yet?
It's a year this week.
It's a year this week. What are you finding in terms of personally you engaging in a brand new community? You're there because your husband got transferred and you're starting all over again. What are you finding in terms of personal engagement?
It's been interesting. I think a couple of instances that were very similar to what Rebecca described, where, I made a call and reached out and said, I'm new to the community. Here's a little bit about my background. I'd love to get together for coffee and talk about the possibilities, because I'm very passionate about the cause that your organization is working on, and I'd love to be able to contribute to that in some way. And I did get a few of those, here are the needs we have. And then I had a couple others where it said, okay, let's look at the possibilities and see what we could do together. And so a couple of those have really started to take off. And so it's been really fun to be a part of those organizations. And what I like about the two in particular that I'm thinking of is that they're not thinking narrowly. They're reaching out to other organizations in the community. Again, as Rebecca said, who else cares about this? And that doesn't mean only in the community benefit sector, but who else broadly in the community, even those free agents. Who cares about this? So I guess I'm a free agent right now. Being in a new community, that's the point I find myself, and just starting to get plugged into things. But another, I think, concrete example that I find very encouraging is a number of organizations that have recognized the possibilities of broader community engagement, and they're moving away from that volunteer program model with a volunteer coordinator or director of volunteer services and looking at a community engagement strategy. And certainly there's a staff person leading that up, but it's very holistic throughout the organization. And it's been great to work with a couple of those as they made that shift and are continuing to make that shift, because it certainly has some growing pains involved with it.
Sure. Rebecca, you'll enjoy this. I was asking about stories that you guys have seen. Lisa said, well, I love the work that Rebecca is doing in Idaho, and I'd love to know more about that, and you fell off the planet. So we decided that was the answer to never asking anybody to share their stories again. In the last couple of minutes that we have here together, Lisa was sharing a little bit about what in a new community. If you've got just one now in terms that's going on around community engagement in your community.
Yeah, in my home community, we've created a collaborative over the last 2 years, and again, you have to think there are probably assumptions about what we are and what we're not, and what we are is for the community, for every single community member who wants to come forward to aim for something what's possible, but it's largely individuals representing community benefit organization. I'm a free agent. My community benefit organization is the entire community. It's the universe. So if I can be the one that holds that space for other people to step into and show how every single time we come together, we honor relationships and getting to know each other, because even in this tiny little community, people don't know each other. Some people do, but there's so many people who don't know each other, or they never knew. One woman who manages a retail shop, I never knew that she was so passionate about youth in one of the homes we have in our community. Every conversation I've had with her has been far richer when I see her at that retail store, because we've now gotten to know each other better. And we're having conversations in our community. There has a piece of land become available, as well as some funds to create a bricks and mortar space. But that one community benefit organization is not kind of saying, oh, this is our thing, we're going to build our thing. But our next meeting in June will be a very open conversation about what could a bricks and mortar space make possible for our community. Not just for the mentoring youth component, but who else could be in there? And I know there's other organizations and spaces around the world that unleash so much, but it's when the community is invested in building it together and sharing ideas and honoring. And some people say, well, that will be mission creep. It is absolutely not mission creep. If we're aiming for a healthy community for everyone, then everyone's ideas will be heard, documented, valued, and part of the journey of what this space could make possible, because then this structure will not be looking at how are we going to keep the lights on, what's all this overhead and operating costs, because we've actually built it from a place that's tapping all the existing community members and resources to build something that is, alive 24/7 for everyone in the community.
It makes me want to move to both of your communities, so that's pretty exciting. I cannot believe an hour has passed. I could talk to you guys for another 2 and 3 hours, which just means that you'll have to come back again, and we'll check in and see what the continuing story is as you both continue to engage your communities. So to Lisa Humanick and to Rebecca Hurd, thank you guys so much. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It has been a wonderful time.
And to everybody who has been tweeting, thank you very, very much, as it's been a pleasure to have you with us. And we will see you next month on next month's edition of Making Change. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.